The retreat. I am with CCSU, Central Connecticut State University. Okay, so to start, would you please state your the war and branch of service you served in?
I ended up in a Corps of Engineers, World War II.
And your rank?
I wound up being a captain. Most of my time was second lieutenant and first lieutenant, but I got a captaincy on separation from the service.
Okay. Where was your, in the theater of operation, where did you serve?
The Pacific. I wound up on Okinawa.
Okay.
I went through 3 campaigns. One was the Peleliu campaign, Guam, and Okinawa.
Okay. Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
You were
October 20th,
October 20th.
1941, before the Japs attacked us.
Okay. Where did you live at that time?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Did you have any animosity for being drafted, or what were your plans prior to being drafted?
At that time, everyone felt disappointed if they failed the physical. So I think everyone wanted to get into the service.
Okay.
I was one of them.
Okay, great. Were you allowed to choose the branch of service you were drafted into?
No.
Do you recall your first days in service?
I certainly do. Camp Lee, Virginia.
Camp Lee, Virginia. And what were they like? Could you tell me about your first days in boot camp?
Well, it was strictly getting accustomed to the Army, getting outfitted with clothing, doing exercises, and so on.
Okay. Can you tell me about the training that you received there? What was your specialty?
Well, Camp Lee was strictly for newcomers. I was there perhaps 3 weeks. Then I was transferred to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to Field Artillery. So I was assigned to a 155 millimeter company, Field Artillery.
Do you remember the instructors at Camp Lee?
Not by name, no.
Not by name?
No. It's a lot of years ago.
I can imagine. Did you have any special tricks or any special way that you dealt with it to get through it? Was it hard?
I had no problem. I fell right into the rhythm of the company that I was in. The initial training is so time-consuming, you don't have time to think. From 5 o'clock in the morning till taps.
Okay, so after boot camp in Fort Lee, you said you went to
Fort Bragg.
How long did you spend at Fort Bragg?
Up until December 30, the same year. Then the whole battalion was trained to Fort Dix, New Jersey. We were assigned to leave the country to go to Puerto Rico.
Okay. So you went to Puerto Rico for more training?
No, assignment. By then I had been transferred to a radar outfit, Signal Corps.
Okay.
So I was a member of a company that followed airplanes, looked for airplanes. It was the beginning of radar.
Okay. What was that like? Were you on the technical side of that, or as far as the radar?
No. All the reports came in from stations around Puerto Rico, and my battalion, was given notes from outlying stations to where blips, where suspected airplanes were in the air. So we had a huge table of the area, and we plotted the paths of these unknowns.
Okay.
Actually, it was most looking for submarines, anti-submarine activity was very brisk at that time. The Germans were sinking everything in sight in the Caribbean.
Okay. So your first, the first part of World War II for you was dealing with the Germans in the Atlantic.
Right.
Okay. And how long were you in Puerto Rico?
1 year.
1 year. When you finished your tour in Puerto Rico,
I didn't finish the tour. Halfway through, and it must have been about August, I applied for officer candidate school, and I was accepted. And I was accepted for the Corps of Engineers. I could have gone to field artillery, signal corps, but I chose the field artillery. What am I saying? I chose the Corps of Engineers. It seemed like it would be just the right fit for me.
Okay. While you were with the Corps of Engineers, what was your specific duty?
Well, by then I had got my commission. I was a second lieutenant, so I was a platoon leader in a company of engineers that was attached to a battalion, 1884th Engineering Battalion.
Right.
So I did what any other platoon leader, looked after his men, saw to their training, to their comfort, and so on. And when jobs had to be supervised, I was one of many that went out in the field and did what I was told to do by the commander.
When did you move into the Pacific Theater?
It must have been about June of 44.
With what unit at the time?
1884th Engineer Battalion.
Okay. And what was it like when you first got there?
Well, we went to Hawaii for 6 weeks. And after 6 weeks there, we were loaded on LSTs, landing ship craft, tank, and we went to the Peleliu campaign. My battalion was assigned to a small island in a Palau group, where Peleliu is, and we were assigned to build an airfield. So the 4 or 5 LSTs that carried our battalion beached on the island, and we went in. Well, prior to our going on the island, Army troops had gone in and cleared the island pretty much. There weren't too many Japanese on it. I think they killed about 150, and that cleared. It was a small island, about 1 mile by 2 mile, all jungle. But our job was to build an airfield, which we proceeded to do. And this airfield housed planes that were used to help MacArthur bomb the Pacific Islands, the Philippines, for instance, so on. So we were there from, I guess, July until about 6 months, I guess. Then we went to Guam to do construction work there. So we worked on airfields, roads, we put up mess halls. Actually, most of our duty had to do with aiding the Air Force. See that they were comfortable and they had the proper facilities, showers and so on.
So you went from Peleliu to Guam.
To Guam.
And did you see any combat on Peleliu personally?
No.
No?
No. I carried a carbine and a .45, but I never. The only Japanese I saw, the island was called Angar, the one in the Peleliu area, were dead Japs.
Were there any casualties in your unit? Did your unit see any combat while you were there?
No, we killed 2 of our own. We had a battalion of about 800 people. And the first night when we landed on a beach, a security group went ahead to make sure that the next day that we could empty the LSTs. And during the night there was a second lieutenant with about 20 security people. And they bivouacked on a beach. And all they had were ponchos they rolled up in. Well, during the night, the second lieutenant, no doubt, moved or something. One of the security people thought he was a Jap. He shot him dead. That was our first casualty. Then about 2 months later, on my shift, I supervised a digging operation. We had 2 shovels that were digging coral that we used as fill for the airfield. And the job was from dusk till dawn, 10 or 12 hours. And I had a sergeant, Wizanan from Texas. He was in charge of the enlisted men. I would give him orders to clear the road and so on. We had a bulldozer that cleared the road after the dump trucks went by, because this fill we're using, the coral, would spill over the sides of the truck. God knows why, but during the course of one of the evenings, he stretched out the middle of the road, and a bulldozer came along, so he was crushed. So those were our casualties, self-inflicted.
Okay. Can you tell me one of your most memorable experiences from your time in the service?
I think the whole period I was in was memorable.
Okay, now, were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yeah, we had a Union citation, a battalion citation on a sleeve, a gold patch for excellent work by the battalion. We'd finished the airfield and so on by then.
Okay.
And then naturally, I never got a good conduct medal. I felt bad about that.
Okay.
Actually, ribbons from the Asiatic Pacific Theater and all that.
So at your time in Guam was peaceful. There were no Japs in Guam.
There were
right?
Japs.
There were.
Oh yes,
Okay.
they were being killed, rounded up and killed constantly. My outfit was a construction organization. We were like the Seabees. I think people have an idea what the Seabees did. We were the Corps engineers equivalent of the Seabees. We constructed everything.
Okay. So, you spent how long on the island of Guam?
Oh God. Maybe 6 months.
And from there you moved north through the Pacific?
From there we went to Okinawa.
And this was later on in the war, obviously?
No, it wasn't. It was about D plus 10, D plus 8, somewhere in that period.
Okay.
It was very, very active.
All right. Can you tell me about your experience in Okinawa?
Well, I was strictly a construction officer. I had 3 or 4 construction projects that I oversaw, and actually I had sergeants at each location that made sure the work was done properly. So, let's see, we got there about April, I guess, when the invasion of Okinawa happened. And then in July, the war ended. But during that period, we were building a military airfield at Naha, Okinawa. So the work pretty much ended. I was eligible for discharge or return to the state. I had enough points. You left the service on a point basis. The longer you were there, you got points for each month and the activity you were engaged in. So,
do you remember how many points you needed?
No, I don't, but I was way up there. Because by then I had had about 4 years of service to begin with. And when I was in Puerto Rico, that was considered overseas duty, believe it or not. And then I had the overseas combat time in the Pacific. I had many, many points.
At any time in Okinawa, were you ever under fire?
I personally no. The only under fire, we had a tornado come through. No, not what?
Typhoon?
Typhoon.
I've been to Okinawa and I can attest that they're not fun. How did you stay in touch with your family during your time of service?
Through emails. Through letters.
Through letters?
Yes. I was married by then. I got my commission in May of 43, on May 26th, and on June 6th, I got married. I had acquired a pen pal when I was in Puerto Rico, and she was working in Washington, D.C. And we wound up getting married. It lasted till she died on me 7 years ago, 61 years later.
Okay.
Did I answer that question?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Yes, you did. Thank you. What was the food like for you?
I had no problem with it. We started off with K rations. And we went into K rations. Then we became very deluxe diners. We got C rations. You know what C rations are? So they came out with a variety, pork and beans and all the others. And then after maybe a month of field rations, the battalion had a kitchen set up, and we ate that way. I have no complaints. Many people didn't like the food, but it was wholesome. It fulfilled its need.
Did you ever experience any time when you didn't get the supplies you needed to complete your job?
No.
So your supply trains were always up to date? there any particular times that you felt under pressure or stress?
Not really. Well, when we were on the LSTs, we had a few storms on the way to Okinawa. The LST would list as much as 30 degrees, and that was stress time.
It sure would be. Did you do anything for good luck?
Prayed a lot.
You religious?
Oh yes, at that time.
What did people do for entertainment?
Well, quite a few of the fellows brought instruments with them. They would put on shows. We had USO shows come in. A few, I think I saw about 2 during my period in the Pacific. And that was enough. And then on Guam, we put up a theater for showing film. So film would come in occasionally. We would see that.
You mentioned the USO. Do you remember any of the entertainers?
No.
No. No big names like Bob Hope?
There were big names at that time. No. Bob Hope was not in World War II, I don't think.
Oh, no?
If he was in Europe. He wasn't in the Pacific. They were mostly girly shows, a lot of leg and so on.
Oh, okay. Can't beat that.
No, you can't.
What did you do on leave when you had the opportunity to go?
Never had leave.
Never had leave?
No, I think all of us were looking forward to have leave on Australia. Australia had quite a reputation for very willing ladies.
I think it still does. Did you do any other travel while you were in the service?
No.
After Okinawa?
No.
No?
No, just came back to the West Coast. We left Seattle. Initially, we came back to Seattle on New Year's Eve. 10 o'clock, our ship docked. And I was one of the lucky ones. I was the only officer that was required to stay on board with a detachment with about 5 or 6 soldiers, and we made sure that nothing happened. So I was sort of glad that I didn't go ashore, because the fellows, just about everybody that could leave the ship left the ship to go into Seattle, and they started coming back. They'd been drunk, crawling, or beaten and whatnot. So it was a sad sight, see so many of the soldiers that got beat up coming back and drunk. So I missed nothing. But to continue, so I went to Seattle, and then I went up to Fort Wood on the coast there, and from there, I came back to Newark Airport on a C-47 that hopped across the country.
Okay.
Military craft, naturally.
All right. Do you remember any humorous events from your time in the service?
Well, the humorous ones was when we crossed the, what do you call it? Neptune.
Across the equator?
Equator, right.
with Neptune Rex.
That was fun.
I've experienced that myself.
Yeah.
So you're a shellback.
Is that what it is?
A shellback.
Yeah. That was about the most humorous. See how people reacted to the hazing they got. They became shellbacks.
Did you ever find that the hazing was too much?
I didn't know. I was an officer.
So you didn't experience the same hazing?
I don't think so. I think I was given a very light hazing.
Can you describe any of those events on that day, crossing the equator? What were some of the typical things that you had to do?
Actually, when you're aboard ship, you're practically in hibernation. You have no duties. It just exists from day to day. That's the way I looked at it. Look out at the sea, watch the convoy, the ships in the convoy, and so on. Army life is boredom, as you know.
So the day you crossed the equator and you became a shellback, the initiation process that you went through, do you remember that specifically?
I remember we had to strip down to shorts, as I remember, and we were wet. I guess we had water sprayed on us and whatnot. I really don't remember all the details of it, but I do remember that we went through it.
Okay. Do you recollect any of your soldiers, any of your subordinates, or any of your commanding officers specifically?
I kept in touch. There were 30 officers in the battalion, and we kept in touch for a number of years, but as the years went by, more and more died off. And it just went to nothing. Last 15 years, I know of none that are still alive.
Did you ever keep a personal diary?
No.
I know that the rule was not to write anything down.
That's right.
So you followed that rule?
Right.
Do you recall the date your service ended? Do you want to take a break now?
No.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the time. My service ended when I was separated in Pennsylvania. I went into inactive reserve. Was it inactive? It was reserve anyhow. In April of 46. That answer your question?
Yes, it does. What did you do in the days and weeks after you separated from the Army?
Well, the first thing I did, I got together with my wife. I hadn't seen her in about 18 months while I was in the Pacific. And we planned for our future. So when I was separated from the service, I had $1,700 in back pay and all that stuff. So that was a lot of money back in 46. So the wife and I visited my folks in Philly. Then we went up to, my wife was from Chicopee, Massachusetts, see her folks, and then it was a question of deciding where are we going to settle down. And I felt that I had a better future in New England than I had in Philadelphia. I had a job in Philly working in a bookbindery, and I didn't see much future in it. So I figured I'd get a new start in New England, which I did, and it turned out well.
Did you attend school when you got out of the service?
No,
or
I did
you went
not.
right to work?
Right.
What was your new career?
I went to work for Railway Express in Springfield, Mass. Railway Express was the company that hauled pretty much fruit and stuff like that from across the country, so we emptied the cars and so on. So I was working there for about 6 weeks when one of my co-workers, my buddy Jimmy, said, "So long, Stan." I said, "Where the hell are you going?" "I got a job with the phone company." So I applied. After that, about 3 weeks after I applied, I was hired. At that time, the telephone company was strictly an all-Irish outfit. The only people they hired otherwise were Italians for working underground, digging and so on. So I was an oddity. Here I am, a Slav, a Ukrainian, getting a job. And I had to call a few times to find out why I hadn't been called, because I had a hell of an IQ. I passed the test, the entry test and so on, with flying colors. So finally, reluctantly, I guess, I got a job. I was hired. And I was hired in May of '46. And I stayed with them for 35 years.
That's a heck of a career.
It was my career. It was a very fine job.
Did you ever join any veterans organization?
Yes. I joined the American Legion for a few years, but I wasn't too enthused about it. I'm not a joiner.
Okay. Did your military experience influence you thinking about war or about the military in general?
Oh, sure. Sure, I appreciate it. I realized what the problems were. And I felt, at least I had an idea of what went on in the service when people either enlisted or drafted, what they went through. I realized it was a necessity to have a military force.
How did your service and experience affect your life?
I think the service made an adult out of me. I learned to appreciate other people. I learned how to get along. And in general, it was a good experience.
Is there anything that I may have forgot that you'd like to add?
I did so damn much traveling. I would like to say that I left Okinawa aboard ship, a Victory ship, which was a luxury ship at that time, because they usually had freighters before that, those 8,000 tons cargo carriers, and the Victory ship was 19,000 tons, and for officers it was all luxury. And it was very nice. I guess we spent about 10 days before we got to Seattle, from Okinawa, from Naha Harbor. And naturally everyone was loose as a goose during that whole time. I don't feel I wasted my time in the military. I feel that I was one of many that was necessary to win the war, the little that I did, the constructions and so on. And I had no animosity against war at all, or the military. That's about it.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. I didn't realize so much time went by, you know. Here it is pushing 11.